There are a million stories in the naked city. Is one of them mine? Or are they all theirs? So today, Same Old G and Sean Driscoll continued a thread from some earlier conversations to expand on the idea of narrative voice in gaming. The idea of running your games where the majority of interaction is in the first person. I do this, I do that, I think this, I think that. Or the third person. He does, or Jack Carson walks across the room. That sort of thing. No mention really was made of what I've taken to calling the second person, which is the indeterminate state of chaos between the decision to run the game in the first person and the decision to run the game in a third person. And that's fine, because they're actually talking about the choice of doing one or doing the other. And some of the finer points which were raised were, how far do you go with each? To what degree of omniscience do you impart to the other players? Do you share your intentions? Do you share your thoughts? Do you share just what you think that their character would notice? Or do you share everything to maximize the experience, or for whatever reason? So this is a very important discussion to have if you're at all interested in changing or improving or experimenting with your game. I mean, you can always just sit down and just play. No one ever says that you can't do that, and it's true, especially when you're meeting a new group. In fact, I would argue that when you've met a new group, maybe it's necessary to play in a more casual mode than you might intend to play later. And this comes back to the idea of social contracts and the like, where you should, of course, make it explicit that this is a getting to know you period. This is kind of like a honeymoon period, and that piece by piece, session by session, you're going to move closer and closer toward the kind of game that you all enjoy. But at the same time, you need time to get to know each other and crack a couple jokes and share some insight and share some experience and bond as a group, especially if the game is the only place you have to do that as a group. But I digress. Gaming in the first person is, as Same Old G mentioned in his clip, what at least I consider to be the most immersive narrative voice to choose, because you're casting yourself in the role of I. You are doing what you can to minimize or reduce the barriers or the layers between the experience of the character and your experience at the table. So you're not taking time to think about what he would do in this situation. You are trying to get as close as you can to making that I. Now, this is very different from acting. Right? Acting is about externalizing the process. We've talked about this before. It's making sure that the audience understands what you're doing and what you're thinking, and they can see it through your body language or your face or whatever. Now, this is definitely something to add to your performance, but gaming in the first person is an experience for the self. It will have collateral effects around the table, where the more immersed, the more involved, the more invested that you grow in the game, the easier it will be for them to riff off of what you're doing, or to take what you're doing as a part of their experience. But at its simplest level, gaming in the first person is removing all barriers and creating two states of play, which Sean Driscoll was mentioning, which are in character and out of character. Right? There is a time for out of character comment and discussion, and there's a time for in character comment and discussion. And when you're playing in the first person as a choice, actions and all interactions with the game world happen through the lens of I, as if you yourself were really that character, if that character were real. Now, they also, when they were talking about the narrative voice, started talking about agency in terms of who really can contribute to the scene. And this is important because if you are trying to run a game in the first person, it can be disruptive to immersion or other things, the flow of the game, to say, is there a lead pipe here? Right, so the character is worried that they're about to enter a tense situation. They don't have a weapon. They're looking around for a weapon to improvise. And in some types of games, you can spend a point to alter the scene, or you can simply invent scene elements to use, providing that you are playing by the rules of the genre that have been established and of the setting. Right? You wouldn't bring a laser pistol into a medieval setting because you think that would be cool, for example. So when you're gaming in the first person, saying, I do this and I'm looking for that, some people can get bound up with how to switch back and forth between IC and OOC, between in character and out of character. Some groups don't care. Some groups don't even notice that this is happening. They're switching seamlessly and without complication between I as the character and I as the player. Right? But in character, you can do this by saying, I'm looking for a crowbar. And the GM would respond naturally with whatever response there was. So you find one on the work table, or you find one in the trunk of the car, or you don't find one, but you do find an aluminum baseball bat, etc., etc. And that all according to always say yes. So it doesn't have to interrupt. Now, in the third person, there's already a layer between you and the character. You're referring to the character in the third person. You have separated yourself from that character for whatever reason. The reasons expressed by Same Old G were excellent. I don't like the character very much, and I don't want to immerse myself in a first-person perspective with the things that this character does. I think that's an excellent reason to choose third person. But third person is harder to play. It's elevating your skill. I mean, we already talk about what I want to do, right? What I did, what I'm going to do. This is a natural part of our vocabulary. Turning that around and starting to speak of yourself in the third person, if you're not a rapper or a sports star, is something that we don't get, common experience of in our day-to-day lives. So this is a skill to develop, and it has specific effects. But why would you choose it? You choose first person to immerse yourself in the character and possibly share or create a more immersive experience for the other players at the table. Choosing third person, you're choosing to immerse yourself in the story. This is not less intense an experience. It's just a different experience, and one which you have to choose at the outset and arrange with the other players to create at the outset. Immersing yourself in the story creates strong visual imagination in a different way than immersing yourself in the first person. And you externalize some of the things that you don't want missed and separate them from yourself. So again, how do you deal with the issue of shared narrative spaces where you are looking for something and you're not sure if it's there, it wasn't included in the description, and some games that you've played in the past have allowed you to just invent, and some games required some kind of point expenditure, or some games there was nothing. Only the game master could create elements in the scene, and so you had to ask for them. When you are speaking in the third person, it's of course easier to access that out-of-character voice and directly ask the game master, but immersion is still a property, and you're trying to immerse yourself in the scene. You don't want to push pause, go out of the scene, ask your question, go, and then try and get back into the scene. No one wants to do that. It's disruptive. So again, we get down to trying to figure out what's actually happening in the scene. Right? Is the character finding an object, or is the character searching for an object? The truth of the matter is, as you are making your description, they're searching. Right? Either the object that they're looking for has already been clearly described, you know where it is, and you state that you go for it. Right? Jack moves across the room and picks up the tire iron to threaten. Or Jack looks for something to threaten. He'd like to find a tire iron. Now this crosses one of the lines, right? The other people in the room don't know what he'd like to find based on his expression. So you could do it this way. Jack looks for something possibly to beat someone with. His hands are gripping. You describe the action that's going along with it and give them the opportunity to interpret by providing some extra contextual clues which they might miss. So, the game master then responds with what is or is not available. And the game goes pretty smoothly and immersively. So let's recap a bit. First person. Among the reasons why you would choose it are to create a very strong personal experience for yourself. The game master is creating the scene, and the other characters are providing their actions, but a lot of what goes on is going on in your head. You might not all be imagining the same thing around the table, but you're all very deeply immersed, or trying to get very deeply immersed in the life of the character, the experience of the character, the reactions of the character, and you're trying intentionally to experience that character as I. In the third person, you are creating a shared experience. Right? Each person is contributing to the externalization of that experience, what everybody sees and the way that it looks and how it looks as I cross the room to pick up that tire iron, and the things that I'm doing while I'm getting ready to beat my antagonist with that tire iron. We're creating together, externalizing some things and not externalizing others. And that's the next level of this discussion, really, is what and how do we do it?